Memory transcription subject, Onso, Yodel technical specialist. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 23, 2137. The captain bore a somber look on her face, as Tyler first imparted the news of Dominion reinforcements from the direction of Calqua. There were a few hushed and hurried conversations, as I strained to pick up the comms chatter. While I couldn't hear what our personnel were saying, I could see the humans' faces cycling through different emotions. The bridge crew were dividing their attention between this new situation, and waging battle against the Arxer ships entrenched in the gas giant's ring. Our progress was slow and steady, careful not to overplay our hand. Their cover was being chipped away at, though it cost us a few ships. Plasma arced from our railgun, seizing a clean angle that I'd forwarded through my analysis of the battlefield. I tried to focus on that single enemy erupting into smithereens, and the increased ability we had to avoid hazards from our closer vantage point. The Dominion didn't budge from their positions. As a few allies fell, our own ship was the recipient of an attempted target lock, likely the same foe that singled us out for a previous plasma strike. I put my head down, and searched for whichever miscreant was gunning for us. Through close inspection, I located a small warship hiding in the shadow of a larger ally. Not wasting a second that could mean the difference between life and death, I forwarded the new target to weapons. Plasma is recharging, but with those nano-drones we stocked up on, I say now's a good time to use them. I shouted. Captain Monahan angled her ear toward me ever so slightly. You heard the yodel. Unload the nano-drones, and deploy a mini-missile salvo to distract them in the meantime. The Terran commander's addition to my plan was sound, but it was disappointing that I hadn't presented the solution myself. The new Dominion blips, 30,000 of them, were distracting me. A part of my brain was mapping their trajectory, and had reached a gut-wrenching conclusion before my conscious mind connected the dots. As the mini-missile delivery vehicles wove around the larger hull, and their payload battered the shieldless hull of the foe targeting us, I checked to confirm my instinctual suspicions. All of the new reinforcements were closing in on our manned vessels to aid their Arxer brethren. We had chosen this engagement because it was the most viable option on the competency gradient. Have we walked into a trap? What do we even do? Peel back and push through the ambushers, weapons at full blast, to regroup. Summon drone backup, when our automatons are already contesting the Shadow Fleet? The nano-drones reached their intended target, punching through the drive compartment. There was nothing the Arxer harassing us could do to avoid going up in flames. The explosion lobbed icy debris from the planetary rings at nearby comrades, which damaged several of its allies. I was certain that Monahan would advise other ships to pivot to nano-drones, but that tactic didn't address the inbound problem. We had a few minutes before the Dominion completed its pincer movement. While I racked my brain for out-of-the-box solutions, the sensors readout glitched. The unmistakable raiding vessels switched over to green, friendly markers. Tyler, 30,000 Arxer vessels are coming in hot on our heels, I announced. I advise immediate action to address this threat. Also, the enemy may have tapped into our systems, since they're suddenly denoted as friendlies. Sovlin huffed with skepticism. Did you press the wrong button by mistake? All that bouncing and fidgeting you do on your hind legs. I didn't touch it. You are disrupting matters of the gravest importance. Does Tyler need to remove you from the bridge? Well, I spoke up to offer sensical advice. Unless it's that nasty Chief Hunter ISIF ships, it's obvious Dominion ships aren't friendlies. And ISIF is buddy-buddy with Zhao, so I'd venture, since we didn't know they were coming, it's not him. The Greys don't have cyber capabilities like Terrans, as Onso should know. Hacking is a fantastical notion. That leaves the possibility that the markers were mislabeled by the Yodel, or by someone else in a high-ranking position. Would any humans betray their kind to aid the Arxer? Captain Monahan snapped her head toward us. No. We're pulling back to fall in line with the new Dominion ships. We have new intel being forwarded that says they're here to take off and are very much against cooperating with the Kolshians. I'll be hailing the new arrival's commander to gather info for the fleet. XO Schwartz has control over battle stations. Comms, extend the hail. I blinked in confusion, doubtful over whether to trust these sources. Sovlin could have a point about power-hungry traitors to the Terran's cause, though I knew very little about this sci-fi he mentioned. Tyler told me that he was an ardent supporter of some archives gray, but I didn't know the specifics. However, it wasn't impossible that this sensor anomaly was an inside job to sow confusion, a betrayal from within. As was evident in the seediest parts of Yodel history, all it took was one person in the right spot who was tempted by grandiose offerings to sell out a movement. If the primates were too trusting of the wrong people, our vessels could be waltzing blind into a crossfire. Our intelligence hasn't dropped the ball yet, Onso, knock on wood. If this was entire agency's conclusion, there must be some basis for it, Tyler reassured me. Carlos dipped his head in agreement. Maybe it's a new addition to the Arxer rebels. I thought they preferred insurgent tactics to direct engagement, but maybe this group buys into the prideful aggression doctrines. Aggression sounds great. Hell, as long their bloody guns point in the right direction, I don't care if they follow the whims of the flying spaghetti monster, Samantha huffed. Our warship reversed its momentum with gradual thruster changes, and glided backwards. The hostile Arxer wouldn't concede their strategic location by the gas giant to pursue us. Of the thousands of Dominion ships in this cluster, we'd picked off a few percentage points. I could see nearby remains of a few of our craft too. We hadn't escaped unscathed. Even with shields, a few well-placed hits in close succession would turn a Terran vessel to scrap metal. Captain Monahan was aware of the singular focus required during a space battle, which was why she was in a hurry to complete the call to our mysterious ally. Seconds passed without a response from the 30,000 ships, who were almost upon us. If there was no answer from this gray bunch, it would certainly elevate my suspicions. Any genuine aid would want to coordinate with their allies. What could possibly be the delay? Before my doubts could creep back in, regardless of the humans' faith in their intelligence, a strange Arxer blinked onto the screen. Abundant scars laced his face, which was an unusual greenish-gray. Rather than standing in their typical display of strength and ferocity, this commander was in an unusual seated position. If he was answering our hail, this must be the chief hunter presiding from a command ship. Given that Sovlin wasn't reacting with recognition, this wasn't the friendly sci-fi. The carnivorous alien bared his teeth in a true snarl, rather than the relaxed teeth-flashing Terrans favored. Humans. I am Chief Hunter Ilthus, and I am here to help you deal with these traitors to betterment, the Arxer growled. Betterment is an ideal of cruelty and dominance. A friend of yours reminded me of this. I was able to contact Chief Hunter Uslif from my neighbor sector, before Gisnell could get to her with that plea. Monahan narrowed her eyes. Why are you helping us, Chief Hunter? We like to know who we're fighting alongside. Uslif and I both wanted to show these Kolshians we don't need their permission to do anything, and that we don't work with prey. I've obtained a copy of some damning footage between those codgers Gisnell and Nikonis, but the Dominion ships have disabled communications for that reason. The command ships are jamming inbound signals to be sure, under the guise of cybersecurity. I could convince many others here to turn if they saw this one clip. There's no way to get them to accept file transfers or hails, without hacking their systems and forcing them to listen. If we had malware on their ships, I suspect it would have been activated the second our brass heard the Dominion was here. You'll need to fight your comrades. Will that be acceptable for you? HSS, you speak as if I care about my associates, human. I'm not so pathetic. They are in my way, they are defending the leaf-licking scum who think they can control us, and I'd rather fight with a sniveling predator like you than join the piss-ridden Federation. At least you don't shy away from a threat. I think the Federation finds us humans to be most troublesome. Clearly, the Dominion's not a fan of the strength and gumption we bring to the table either. If I may, Chief Hunter, do you know how the Arxer were persuaded to work with the Commonwealth? HRR, they claim that you will eliminate any threats to your claim over the prey animals that populate the galaxy. Therefore, the Arxer will not have a right to exist, and pooling forces with an undesirable herbivore is to protect future raids. They say it's about the right to cruelty, but it's really about control and a lack of ambition. Isif told me that you'll back a society with a different despot to Gizno. I'll answer to no more cowards. That senile, defective chief hunter has the right idea with a power grab, but the role seems better suited to me. We can settle the future of the Dominion after the Federation is gone, Chief Hunter. The perfect tone of diplomacy from Monahan, for this self-centered individual. This is a chance to defeat them entirely, and stop the Arxer from being directly controlled by the herbivores who insulted you, by trying to starve you. Who do you want to be the one responsible, a hero even, in their defeat? Ilthus' eyes glowed with malice. Generations will know of my power. A true chief hunter would never fight for the Federation. We're taking the gas giant. If you leaf lickers want to come with us, you better keep up. The Arxer disconnected from the hail, and Captain Monahan allowed her neutral mask to fall. She closed her binocular eyes with a bit of weariness, no doubt from her negotiating attempts all being centered on crazy people from deranged regimes. That would tucker anyone out, and challenge their professional tone. I could at least rest assured that this newcomer's motives checked out, so human intelligence had read the situation correctly. The Terran manned ships merged with Ilthus vessels, coordinating with Arxer commanders over comms. With 30,000 new craft on our side, we should be able to clean up the inferior force much quicker. I checked my sensors readout, gauging the other battlefronts. Sir, an update on our allies' status. The other Yodel ships have pushed deeper into Alpha's system. If I'm reading this correctly, it seems Terran drones quietly slapped on their own particle beams. The Shadow Fleet is sustaining disproportionate losses. The Sapient Coalition is struggling against the enemy's manned ships, though, and appears to need urgent backup. We can't afford to divert any resources. We're committed to pushing forward with Ilthus, and if the A-Team is succeeding against the Shadow Fleet, they should keep the foot on the gas too. Taking out those ships is the top priority, after all. What happens when the SC ships fall on their first engagement, of many? We're at the outer bounds of the system, not Alpha. If we spend this battle bailing them out, we won't be able to focus on our goals. They knew the risks. They need to hold their own, unless we get more magical reinforcements out of left field. While I knew that my human exchange partner was correct, having only two main groups to deploy would hinder our capabilities to address evolving threats. It was a shame that herbivore-crewed militaries were always bumbling fools. I think that knowledge-colored Terran's initial perception of me, in this role, more than the primitive accusations I faced elsewhere. Determined to set myself apart from other ex-Federation volunteers, I hunched over the sensors to find us an edge. The green dots denoting Ilthus ships were throttling ahead at full burn. It was convenient for us that they sent themselves to the front lines to absorb the worst of the incoming fire. This is a novelty, seeing Dominion ships fighting against themselves, untold aggression cancelling each other out. Ilthus will want to push into the ring for close-range angles, blasting his opponents with kinetics and plasma they can't dodge. It'd be a no-win bloodbath, except that we can seize the distraction for mid-range strikes. Ilthus is likely to get up close and personal with his old friends, I advised. We should be careful not to hit him. Sovlin grumbled to himself. Should we now? So much for, wise sage Sovlin, handle tactics. Ahem. Don't hit him, because we need his vessels alive to increase our chances during later engagements. I suggest we hold our fire to precede him by just a little bit, so the enemies are distracted when he pulls up alongside them. Tyler grinned with approval. Good work, Onso. Chart Ilthus intercept vectors, and inform us when you estimate a ship is 10 seconds from deploying kinetics. Yes, sir. 30,000 overlapping lines blinked onto my sensor's readout, but I knew our vessel needed to protect one, other Terran craft would handle the others. I applied filters to chart vectors only for Ilthus' speediest ships, and those who were the closest to the gas giant's ring. After combing through the data, and allowing our new allies to get nearer to the target, I pulled up a nimble warship's pathing. It was flying headlong into a barrage of plasma, while we conserved the brunt of our weaponry for the climax of this aggressive strategy. The fresh Dominion ships had an abundance of missiles to unload at the Kolshan allied hostiles. Scores of casualties were racking up on both sides, but the arrogant chief hunter had almost gotten his ships inside of the icy debris. I pulled up one vessel, we could just barely catch an angle of its belly. We can blow a hole in the underside of this one, or at least make it startle. Plasma needs to get a shot off in the next few seconds. Weapons, fire on this target now, Monahan ordered. My ears perked up as our beam was dispatched with impressive haste. Somehow, the humans hadn't sacrificed anything in the way of precision. Our Arxer foes were paying more mind to their kinsmen than the UN fleet hanging back, perhaps under the assumption that the debris lent them enough shelter to disregard us. Their negligence allowed us to tear a gash in the Mark's belly, compromising its integrity. Terran vessels around us fired off similar shots, landing strikes wherever we could. A few kills, along with many damaging hits, were notched on our enemies. Several enemy guns, which had been preoccupied raining hellfire on a charging Ilthus, zapped plasma in our direction in response. The Terran manned fleet was able to avoid prolonged fire, since Ilthus regained their attention with his arrival. The scarred chief hunter had lost thousands of ships with his recklessness, but it was one way to flush the Dominion from the icy rings. The Arxer friendlies stormed the natural-made fortress, cycling between their three main munitions as fast as biologically possible. More missiles were spit off from close range in an overkill, wasteful gesture, while turrets revved to life to pump kinetics across entire ship bodies. Plasma had barely flashed from twin railguns before it collided with our enemies. Ilthus' strategy was to shoot everything his force had, all at once, without giving them a second to breathe, and it was working like a charm. Now that our plasma has recharged, another supporting volley should cause them to crumble. Even the Arxer themselves didn't expect this much aggression from one of their own. This Ilthus Grey is unhinged, not my ideal choice of ally. I served up another target on the platter, and weapons needed a quick go-ahead to sizzle energy toward the fray. The Terran fleet had drifted nearer, allowing a shorter time to impact. I had the viewport focused on our current mark. As human technicians blasted plasma straight into key systems, the craft somehow stayed together, but the gaping hole through its hull left it listing off vector. Ilthus people were on it in a second, killing a vessel that was already out of the game for good measure. The Dominion's numbers had dwindled in light of our new arrival, though they pumped out desperate last shots toward the new chief hunter. Our crazy ally was able to pounce on the final remnants, with our help, but the swift victory was at the cost of an eye-watering 10,000 of his ships. Ilthus' help won't last long, if he keeps bleeding ships like this. I adjusted the viewport toward the open expanse of stars, as our warship banked to join our allies deeper in the system. Speaking of allies, that sapient coalition situation I mentioned has gotten worse. We should help them. Samantha rolled her eyes. In a shocking turn of events, our alien help leaves much to be desired. Except for the Yodel ships, you're pretty much as good as ex-feds get. I'm so flattered. Not that you're completely wrong. With help like this, we certainly could use more ships. We just made it past their first bastion of defense, and the numbers won't get any prettier. Sovlin tapped a claw against the screen, finding faint indicators from the edge of the opposite side of the system. Then you're going to like this. Already marked a tentative green, computer must think they're not Kolshan or Dominion. We should ask these guys to head toward the bulk of the action, rather than drifting way out yonder. The first wave of reinforcements that were on our side had quieted my doubts, but the Gojid war criminal was speaking as if more new additions were joining our fleet. I snapped my attention to the activity that he picked up, seeking out supplemental information so I could brief the captain on their origin. The subspace trails were a bit strange, and would take a moment to untangle from this range, but I was confident I'd figure it out. Whoever this latest group was, I was hoping it was someone more reliable than gunslinging Ilthus. Humanity needed proper aid to bail out their sapient coalition partners. Memory transcription subject, Captain Sovlin, United Nations Fleet Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 24, 2137. Now that humanity and its allies were here at Alpha, I could feel the weighty gaze of history upon us. The chance to free our societies from the Federation's grip was both terrifying and inspiring. The Kolshians had stripped us of our own cultures, and thrust us into a censored life of suffering. A government that valued control above all else must not be allowed to exist. Just as I had once considered humans a menace incapable of feeling, out to conquer and pillage, I saw the same creatures that deserved anguish fighting in this system. The Dominion and the Commonwealth, paw in paw, both responsible for my tormented lot in life. If it weren't for Resell, I might stand with Onso in wanting off a glass. The personalized anger always shaped my strategizing for the better, though the yodel had been piping up before I could assemble my tactics. I guess that Primitive wanted both jobs at the sensor station. However, I had no intention of taking a back seat during the attempt to vanquish the Kolshians. My eyes stayed alert for anything useful that could kickstart new ideas. While monitoring the sensor feed for data relevant to our tactical options, 50,000 friendlies at the edge of our detection range caught my attention. In the span since we first arrived in system, our fleet had now gained 80,000 new participants, nearly doubling our original count. Of course, I'd like to have Ilthus head on a pike, but thankfully, that warmongering Arxer seemed capable of killing off the beasts under his control by himself. 1/3 of his force dying back at the gas giant saved human lives, so I could tolerate Greys getting blown to dust in our stead. That said, I hoped the computer wouldn't identify these new arrivals as more Dominion monsters, answering to some other chief hunter with a vicious ideology. The confusing bit was that they were denoted as friendlies. If these were Federation or Arxer vessels, their signatures would have been matched to the ones in system. Had someone from the Sapient Coalition decided to send more ships? I snapped my head up, catching on to a remark from Onso about needing more ships. Then you're going to like this. Already marked a tentative green, computer must think they're not Kolshian or Dominion. We should ask these guys to head toward the bulk of the action, rather than drifting way out yonder. The yodel had been pensive since the battle began, likely worried about our odds of taking down this army, a joint force from the two greatest powers in the galaxy, which shattered the records for any battle force. Onso had understood that our outlook was grim. Going in, I think the Primitive saw this as a suicide mission. Reality hadn't looked upon us with kindness, at first. The Terran shipyards at Proxima Centauri, built up adjacent to a colony with temporary housing, and the cumulative manufacturing power of Earth held significant output for a single species. The Predators seemed as if they could do anything, when faced with a challenge to their kind, yet it paled in comparison to the system-filling numbers we were up against today. I knew what hopelessness looked like from gauging the morale of my Gojit crew, back when we squared off against the Arxer. The charge we led against the Cradle's raiders had a few realists, like Onso. It was only when Ilthus showed up that I saw the first glimmer of hope within the yodel, and with 50,000 new additions to our roster, optimism was gleaming in my crewmate's eyes. I could see that the marsupial was trying to temper his rising spirits. It was important to verify that these were friendlies. If these latest additions were truly on our side, we might be able to fill the system with our own fleet. There is the issue of the 200,000 enemies that are Shadow Fleet, but it sounds like the Yodel and Terrans have their number. Something about beams of particles. Before we hail these fellas, we should know who they are, Tyler decided. For all we know, it could be some trick by the Kolshians to dress their fleet up as Venlil ships. Samantha rolled her eyes. That would never work. The Venlil gave us most of their military. 50,000 ships don't grow on trees. Are you sure about that, Sam? Carlos teased. The blonde-haired officer blinked in irritation. Enough. You get my point, we can't afford to be wrong here. Who are we dealing with? Just one more second, sir. Anso furiously applied some filters to the subspace trail data, before his optimism seemed to fizzle. Oh. It's the Durerton shield. I shot a withering look at the Yodel. Why are you saying that like it's a bad thing? Because, like all Federation militaries except for the one we're squaring off against, they've shown they're completely incompetent. I was in the Federation military. My point stands, old man. Insolent prick. Do you know who was the only captain to spot the Terran ambush on Gojid border outposts, despite their stealth deception? Samantha curled her nose at me. Why are you saying that like it's a good thing? Besides, maybe my memory's a little hazy, but didn't you do nothing to intervene? Something about expecting us to be unable to resist slaughtering the civilians on your colonies, so you camped by an inhabited world instead of your base. I might have been a little offsides. My point is, I saw through your tricks, so I was somewhat competent. Not all Federation captains are the same. Tyler was visibly trying not to laugh. This really shouldn't be amusing, should it? Guess compared to the shit that came after, it's the good old days. Now sit back, we're going fast as we can to help out those SC ships. Unfortunately, Anso has a point about Federation captains not holding up under pressure. They need us. Damn right they do, the Yodel declared. Well, now that they're here, don't we have to contact the Durerton shield? Make sure they don't wander off unsupervised? I'm sure we wouldn't put it that way, but yes. It's a good number of ships, and maybe this time will be different. Believe it or not, I heard they held up surprisingly well defending Calqua. Cornered animals, sir. Sovlin probably needs that concept explained, since prey could never hurt anyone just because they're out of options. I scoffed. I don't take explanations from medievalists and microwave chefs. Go make your fucking call. Officer Cardona ran a final confirmation with Anso of the data, before passing along the news of Durerton shield reinforcements to Captain Monahan. The UN commander gauged the distance between us and the floundering Sapient coalition. The manned Kolshan vessels were making quicker work of our direct allies than the shield's last stand. Pairing the two groups together could grant them more backbone, and adding the Calqua natives to the mix took our tally above 180,000. The real question was whether the avians were finally friendly toward the humans, or whether they'd cause fractious disruptions. The tone of this conversation would indicate their disposition toward us. Without humanity's kindness, the Durerton species would be in the same positions as the Gojids post-cradle, if not worse. I don't see how they could find it in their hearts to still harbor hatred for us. A Durerton commander blinked onto the screen. We were hoping a Yodel captain would speak to us about our integration, but I suppose a predator will suffice. We're here to make off a pay for what they did to us. Good, Monahan growled with a neutral expression. If I may, weren't the homogeneity's numbers devastated at Calqua? I thought you only had a little less than 10,000 ships total. I do know my own fleet strength. Look, we lost more people than you did on Earth. I'm so angry I can't think straight. If the Kolshans attacked us again, we'd be fucked anyways, so we might as well point our guns at them, here and now. Understood. The other 40,000 are shield allies? The less he felt guilty for not sending any ships to Calqua, some grudge about being iced out of the Federation military. The Jor saved most of their fleet for today, because, surprise, they wanted to help out with this anyway. Wait, why am I telling a predator this? I'm sure the motives of 44 species, and which ones turned up, don't matter to you. What registers is violence, and there's 40,000 shield ships that want to dish that out. You know, we're happy you're here. We'll forward the coordinates of our herbivore allies' advance, and you can team up with them. They'll fill you in on any details you need. Oh, and Commander? The avian stiffened. Yes? Humanity is not your enemy. We're starting to see that. Thank you for saving us. The Duerden struggled to say those last words, and hurriedly disconnected from the call. Samantha chuckled with disbelief. It seemed the avians hadn't put the entirety of their predator distaste aside. However, I trusted the shield to fight by our side, as long as it meant dishing out retribution to Alpha. The look in the homogeneity commander's eyes when she spoke about her anger struck a chord. It wasn't dissimilar to how I'd felt after losing my family, stewing in hatred and a desire to make the responsible party suffer. In her case, that grief was fresh. Trusting the Duerden not to do something rash would be foolhardy under the circumstances. We need to keep an eye on them. They're not thinking straight, I said. Carlos nodded in agreement. I know. Every human on this ship knows how they feel. Many of us came out of Earth's attack willing to do anything to the Federation. However much they're not of sound mind now, Tyler began. Samantha sighed. Or ever. We need their numbers. Their desperation could make them fight better. You heard it from their mouth. They know if this battle isn't won, they can't defend Calqua anyway. Their fleet is in tatters. Anso flicked his ears. The archives told us how loud and individualistic they are, and it shows. They do crazy, illogical things during bursts of emotion. Assassinating Nikonas because they were angry over their uplifting? Leaving Calqua with 0 ships to their name now? Let's not tell them that, I responded. It won't matter as long as we win this fight. Unlike the Kolshians, the United Nations isn't a habitual practitioner of genocide. Yet the Federation said we'd conquer and enslave them all. Carlos shook his head, as if disappointed by our continued reality. They accused predators of what they themselves do. I wonder if they hate us because our darkest moments are a mirror of their finest. Samantha patted his shoulder. Oh, you sweet little thing. They hate us because of our eyes and our food, and don't need another reason. They wanted us to be conquerors, it just turns out the system we're conquering is theirs. Now, let's go bail out those bumbling SC idiots. This should be an easy stop, but let's not get complacent. Man your stations, everyone, Tyler ordered. Yodel technocracy ships and Terran drones were also moving their vectors toward us, after tallying a resounding victory against the Shadow Fleet. The Sapient Coalition bunch were the last group still engaged, for our initial skirmishes by the outer planets. A light formation of manned hostiles were giving our herbivore friends a world of trouble. Tactics on both sides had broken down into a disorganized shooting match that was tilting toward the Kolshians. The SC's numbers had been nearly halved by an enemy band much smaller than them. It wasn't worth waiting for the Duerden Shield, or our autonomous allies, to join our rescue. Human crew members can handle a straightforward task, and do a clinical job cleaning up this area. The quicker we deal with this, the sooner we can push toward the inner planets. Anso pulled up an enemy target on screen, as we coasted within range, while I monitored whether any foes turned toward us. The Commonwealth vessels seemed a bit dispirited, like they believed that their government was sacrificing them to the cause. With those extenuating factors in mind, it wasn't a surprise that they were slow to react. If Riesel were still alive today, would he have been called home and roped into serving his nation? I almost felt guilty as we nabbed our first mark, nailing them with a plasma beam that was all too easy to land. The Sapient Coalition regained a bit of their senses, with humanity coming to their aid. Our herbivore allies regrouped enough to coordinate fire on specific Kolshian vessels. I passed along which ships were being targeted by our allies, so we could pool our resources on the ones they neglected. The manned enemies turned their last missiles toward human-crewed ships out of spite, bitter at the predators who sealed their suicide mission. The barrage could be batted aside by most of us, except for smaller vessels that had too many inbound explosives centered on them. With the rapidly dwindling number of Commonwealth survivors now out of projectiles, it simplified cleanup even further. A small handful of Kolshan ships attempted to flee, and were pursued by the fastest Terran craft. We couldn't allow them to fall back, bolstering the largest contingents near Alpha. I knew the point of the staggered resistance was to soften us up for when we reached the inner sanctum. Excessive planetary defenses and the best Commonwealth Dominion vessels would be waiting. Having less threats to contend with improved our odds, given the daunting scale of the task ahead. Taking the Federation Founders' world wouldn't even be the end of our mission. Finish off anything with a Kolshan warp drive. Monahan barked. We have new orders from command. While it's ideal to split our forces, UN-manned ships are being paired with the Shield and the Coalition. We can't afford to leave them to their own devices, so we stick to them like glue. Navigations, sensors, find us the best point of attack by the inner planets. Weapons, bring me an update on our ammunition stores. Comms, patch us into allied channels and keep us synchronized. A chorus of assent came from the stations the captain called upon, while the last Kolshan resistance in this region was mopped up. It was troublesome that our sapient coalition allies had bungled such an easy assignment. I hoped the furious, revenge-seeking Duertan Shield would have a higher level of competency. If none of our partners could handle their own, our warship would be strapped to an anchor. Human leadership needed to have the good sense to cut them loose, if it came down to it, and make the requisite sacrifices to win this battle. I peered at the sensor's screen. I see we've plotted an intercept course, to rendezvous with the Duertan Shield. After that, I say we go toward that oblong rocky planet, Kato, if I remember its name. An unimportant research colony with a few HAB modules. Unless you want to bomb it, I wouldn't concern yourself with settlements aside from Alpha. Sovlin is right, Onso agreed. It's a prime target. There's a mix of Commonwealth manned vessels and Dominion ships. I imagine neither side likes that, so they might not be fighting, or coordinating at their best. Precisely. Tyler ducked his head. I'll forward our suggested destination to Navs, along with the location of known enemies. Anything else we should know? Well, just some tactical advice, sir. From what we can see on here, the enemy resistance only gets thicker as we go forward. I recommend keeping the SC and the Shield in supporting roles. No, that won't do. The Duertan won't be happy taking a back seat here, Onso challenged. They want revenge for what was done to them. We already established that they're highly emotional, and not thinking straight. Then what are you suggesting? We let them take the lead, despite their questionable competency? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Sovlin. Let the Duertan pick their role, and see how they fare. Kato is the test of whether it's best to let them go off on their own. Tyler pursed his lips. I don't see a better option to keep them in line, and getting in their way could make them turn their guns on us. This might convince them we're on the same side. I'll fill the captain in. She can have someone that's an herbivore ask their decision on how we want to play this. Let's hope this goes better than we all expect, Samantha grumbled. As the sensors officer marched off for a conference with Monahan, I found myself questioning the Yodel suggestion. I hated to admit that Onso's advice was normally sound, but in this case, his idea could be detrimental to the fleet's success pushing deeper. It would be enough of a challenge to protect weaker allies without putting them in charge of our next move. The humans were attempting to manage a tricky situation, with the numerous parties for and against them in the battle, yet this seemed like a ludicrous gamble. I hoped that the Duertan Shield's combat actions today would be as bold as their words. We needed not just to win this next stage of the clash, but also to swing momentum to our side heading to Alpha. None of this factored in Ilthus ships, which had moved off on their own vector, rather than aiding our sapient coalition friends. That bloodthirsty chief hunter must not have wanted the appearance of teaming up with prey. There was no question that the Duerten would not appreciate our arcs or aid. I didn't envy the Terran brass, trying to juggle these different interests. If anyone could keep this tinderbox from erupting into flames, it was humanity. The Predators had been agents of peace since day one on the galactic scene.